Right. Okay. Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I know it's a very busy week, so I'm very honored that you've come along to check out my talk. But you may be asking, who am I? Good question. My name is Bryn Mawr Richards. I use they, them pronouns. I'm currently the head of Chit Chat at Super Rare Games. I look after a variety of digital and physical titles. I lead our social media campaigns, and I tend to be the person that builds a lot of communities behind our digital titles. I've worked on games like Ocho, Potion Permit, and the upcoming Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip. I've been working in SOCOM for about 5 years or so. I was originally a theater volunteer, worked at a place called Greenhouse, and I went to P-Cube, and I was also at a place called Team Junkfish. So I've been around the block. But I feel more importantly, I'm the person who brought an axe to develop. Don't freak out. It's a cosplay replica of Kratos' axe, and I'm really not able to hurt anyone with it unless I swing really hard. And it's a pretty good prop, I feel, to kick off what I'm going to be talking about today and what you all came here to see. Taking an indie game on social media and spreading it from announcement to release and beyond. And I'd like to start by talking about how you throw axes. And before you walk out, I promise that I will loop back around to running social media campaigns, and I won't actually be throwing my axe indoors because I don't want to get kicked out of Develop today. So I'm going to start this by introducing you to one of my friends. Her name is Nikki. She's from Boston. She is also known as Penakillen. She's one of the top 10 axe throwers in the world, top 10% of all of them. And again, I promise I will loop this background, but this is a quick video of some skills that she wanted to show off.
Hi, Bryn, and hi to Build 2023.
Cool, right? So Nikki has taken me axe throwing quite a few times, and when I started out, I was really, really very bad at it. I almost missed every shot for a very long time. There was also an energy of fear every time it bounced back at me. And you can see here mental hits, just in case it would swing back and hit me in the face, which I think would be very unlikely. However, after some time, I actually started to hit the target, which I personally couldn't believe. Yeah, look at that. And then when we played our next game, I hit my first shot. And then I hit my second shot, my third, and my fourth. And it was getting to a point where I was competing against Nikki, who was a professional, and not just throwing axes that bounce off a wall. I even had this moment. I said I'm going to get a bullseye. Actually, did. That's just me showing off. That's all I need for today. So I made a realization that I've in my life taken a very similar approach to social media. I promised I was going to bring it back. And I'm going to tell you how in many different ways. And I really want to start that out by saying that technique is a very important thing in social media marketing. And it's a memory of anyone who's going through social media that you are an individual. And part of finding your own technique is finding your own rhythms, is finding your own personality and perspective that you're able to put into your social media marketing. And it also came with an unfortunate truth. Much like the first axe throw, I came to a realization that organic social media is luck. Scary, right? Terrifying. But unlike this unfortunate truth, your job as a social media manager is understanding that this luck is controllable, it's understandable, and it's also compelling. It's something that you can work towards. So what I'm going to walk you through today is a strategic system that will help you adapt your own techniques and give you a structure to experiment within. And once you find some consistency, you might also figure out what leads you to success. So I'm going to talk about that in 3 different sections. I'm going to be talking about content strands and asset efficiency, the key content we need to create a heavy social media campaign, 9 steps to social success, a timeline and program that you can base your plans on, and how you can control luck, walking through the need for active social media work. So I'm going to start by talking you through something I call content strands. Now, content strands on my next page are what I would argue are three broad categories that you can delegate all of your content from your game into. I'm going to take a game that I worked on previously, Ocho, and I'm going to give you three categories that I've broken this game down into that I can help base all of the content that I create for this campaign. I start with, it's a roguelike, so I say customization is a big thing. You have drinks within the game, guns, weapons, purchasing, and the ability to upgrade your own work. The gameplay itself is a unique feature. You know, what can you expect from a roguelike and what might not you expect? And then finally, the world and the narrative. Now, with these content strands, I'm able to build my understanding of what the key selling points of this game is and make sure I simplify them, because you don't have a lot of words on social media half the time. So for me, before you start your big plans and before you start working towards what you're going to be working towards, figure out your content strands for your game. They might be 2, might be 4, but they are broad and they are categorizable. Once you have those, you want to move on to something that is called asset efficiency. This was a term I first heard coined by Jared Tan from the Cult of the Lamb campaign, and we all know how well that went. So this is all about allowing yourself to find footing through experimentation and guide your social plans throughout your campaign. So to create asset efficiency through content strands is you take your 3 strands, you've got your customization, gameplay, world, and narrative. You capture gameplay within the game with these strands in mind, and you create content for your social and community calendars with this content. With these, hand in hand, you will find yourself at the perfect start for planning out your campaign. Bring it back to axe throwing. If you imagine in every single time you were about to throw an axe, if you had to build the axe from nothing, you'd take quite a while to actually get anything good. So what you want to do is have a bank of things that you can work with and understand before you start towards your major planning phase. And with these in your pockets, you can start working towards what I call the 9 adaptive steps. This is how you plot out a year's worth of social media content, aka planning ahead for absolutely insane people. Normally, I'd explain this and tell you how you should be posting in certain ways, but it won't translate to every single account. So I've tried to keep this broad, and hopefully if you're trying to plan something out long-term, you'll be able to find something within this that you find. So I'm going to go, this is a bit of a cheat, but the first one is phase 0. Everyone's always in phase 0. Now, this is pre-announcement. This is before you've properly put your game out there. This is when you're creating your content strands and your asset efficiency, your content banks, to really plan out and make these things. If you're about to announce a game, you're currently in pre-announcement. If you've just thought of an idea for a game, you're in pre-announcement. But that all changes when you go into phase 1, announcement. Now, this takes about a day. This is when you've announced your game, you've shown it to the world. If you have a launch trailer, you get it out there. You also want to try and take people away from some of your social channels towards perhaps a Steam page or a Discord, something that you can control. But make sure you get everything out there to do with your launch trailer and a good set of content to kick yourself up. Prioritize call to actions. Avoid overloading copy with text. Allow assets to speak for themselves and fill your social media feed. You only have 1 day to convince people that this is going to be a pretty good game. So once you get through this, you move into what I call post-announcement awareness. This is phase 2. This is about 3 or 4 months of work. This is when you start to build awareness about your game, but you're not actively selling it. You create visually appealing assets of characters, environments, plot points, features, without digging too deeply into what they are. You must allow your fans to start to speculate and get excited. And here, it's where subtlety is key, which moves on to post-announcement interest 2 or 3 months after this, where subtlety is out and it's time to get nasty. Now is the time to dig into these game features. You've made people aware, and now it's time to make them interested. You know, gameplay, selling points, dive into stories, break down what's going on behind the scenes. In these moments is when you really kick into the peak of your content strands and use the assets that you've already made previously. After this is the arguably most intense phase besides your launch, which is drive demand. Now, this is about 1 or 2 months of work. So now that people are interested in your game, you have to drive them into the sales category. A little tidbit of information. When it comes to launching your game on Steam, for example, my goal is to get 15 positive reviews within the first hour. Then I'm playing with the Steam algorithm, I'm not panicking about it. So it means you have to start harboring close-knitted, loyal fans, understanding how much they love this game and why they love it. Because I guarantee at that point they will. don't be afraid to still take risks. It's time to start putting out as much content as possible now. And something important is that during Drive Demand, you need something to change. You need something new, something like a release date or a new platform that you hadn't previously announced, something that information that is big and important that you haven't really been able to share previously. You might share content like tutorials, deep dives, make it real with pack shots, merch, information, larger influencers, if you're able to get them the game early, start sharing press and driving wish lists. And then a week before your launch, phase 5, you go into pre-launch. We're really getting into like the thick of your game now. You shouldn't really be trying to find new audiences anymore. You've found your audiences, and through analysis, you should know who's coming in and who's buying this game. Your goal now is to make sure that they actually end up buying it. Start counting down, promoting your pre-orders if you have them, and really pushing that wishlist link on every single post. And finally, similar to announcement, you've got 1 day to launch this game. It is a really important day to push absolutely everything out there. You cannot be afraid of overposting. There's a lot of fear about overposting, but in this day, you've got to go out there as much as you can. You need answers as well. Start talking to your developers as a social media manager. Figure out what people are going to ask on day 1. What did you ask when you first picked up this game? Because I guarantee someone else is going to. After this, you move into a post-launch period, which is very adaptive depending on who you are. During post-launch, you may be starting to calm things down a bit, allow content to speak for itself, start to talk through what I call UGC, user-generated content, things like fan art, streamers, reviewers, all these people that are really important towards allowing your community to start to speak for itself and be your biggest advocates, which is then slowly when the game goes into cooldown and backcat and you start to allow the conversations to continue, but you aren't really the spark anymore. You allow your community to thrive, you become a part of it, but you also recognize that you can't keep that energy up forever and you have to allow them to work on towards yourself. So to break that down in a kind of timeline, I've put that in kind of 11 months there. And I've also kind of spotted how many posts I would argue that you should be doing around these kind of time periods. I've not made these platform specific because I can talk for days about how different platforms may be doing different things. But in general, this is the amount of content you should be trying to put out during these periods, from your announcement to your launch, about 11 months. Now, if you think your game is a shorter period, if you think your game needs a longer period, that's absolutely fine. Just try and figure out where you think will be more important. If you think you need more time and interest, aka your features are deeper, push the time on your interest. If you think you have really big news when it's bringing up to launch, give yourself more time for Drive Demand. Through this timeline, something that's really important to remember is this idea of expectation. Now, through this whole thing, I've been talking about indie games. That's really important to remember. I'm not talking about AA or AAA. I'm talking about grassroots, often small teams, often low budgets, indie games. And expectation is one of the hardest things to properly break down. If you imagine this is your indie game, it's 100% of it. My argument is that in all those phases I've just broken down, you want to show about 30%. About 30% of what your game is, because then you're building expectation of what they should expect further than that. Because audiences are mixed. There are people who find so much love in so many different games. So when you build an expectation, I probably argue that 30% is a good little number to work towards. Now, the issue is if you do this and you build your expectation, and let's say on social media, you share about 70% of the content from your game, your audience's perception is probably still going to be in that 30%. So when that game launches, this is going to be their expectation. It's going to go way beyond what you could have possibly promised. You're not sitting there and overhyping, overpromising, saying it's got so much more, but they will take what you could give and run with it. And it's not their fault. You must understand that you can't show everything, but you must show what you know people will love. And then I'm going to finish up by talking about what I really talked about at the start, which is the idea of flicking through my sheets to remember where I am in my script. The idea of luck factoring into these steps. Your willingness to experiment, hopefully during these phases, has led you to some gold. A tweet that did well, an influencer that picked you up on TikTok, or a Reddit post that went straight to the top of r/GameDev. Without money, which is a thing that I'm arguing here is organic, because you're not paying for ads, these things are not controllable. They happen. And if you're lucky and if you follow these things, they have happened to happen. And with these 9 steps, you'll give yourself a solid amount of awareness that will lead to moments like this. But my best advice to any social media manager out there is that you must be active and understanding of when you have found that luck. And your biggest advantage is that you are working on this game. Figure out what they have, figure out what they love. If they love the art style, you have concept art to show. You have deeper images that you can still keep within that 30%. They haven't cracked everything, but you know what these individuals love. Message the influencer, see if you can get them something. Actively talk to the people around you to make sure that you are checking and working through your luck right. Show things that you can't possibly show. In professional axe throwing, there is a move called a clutch. It's the last shot of a round. It's a really hard shot to do. It's right in the top corner. It is worth 7 points and will often turn the tides of a game, but it's really hard to do. However, if you have a good axe, as in you're well prepared, you will be able to hit this shot. And I promise you that with it, you will get your game through. Thank you very much. How much time I have left? Good, I have lots of time left because I definitely was wanting to answer questions kind of about social media awareness because I just didn't think I'd be able to get everything in there. If you have to leave, that's absolutely fine. I have all of my information up there. If you can take my email, but please don't spam me. And yeah, if you've got a question, please put your hand up and I'll get a mic pointed to you.
Hi, so I work for a game that's been in early access for a while now. And so when it was initially released, it had quite a large community initially, and it's been quite a while since then. And the community has definitely calmed down. Do you have any tips for reviving a community as we sort of push up to launch?
Reviving community is hard. I'm never going to pretend that's an easy thing to do. But as I said earlier, the important thing is realizing that you have more information to give them. As you work towards launch, I would definitely argue reimagine the steps that I've just given there and imagine it as a new launch with a pre-established audience. It is, oh, I did a tap. Okay, that's fine. It is something that you can absolutely work on. It's something that, you have an audience there. You can give them things that they might not expect and very much rebuild your phrases, rebuild your time and figure out, how much time do you have to launch, talk to your devs, work with them. And yeah, I think through that, you'd be able to hopefully revive a community. It's never an easy thing to do, but realize where your audiences are and figure out how you can use them.
Thank you.
That's good. Any other questions? One at the back. It's hot here, isn't it?
Hi. Do you have any advice for when things get inevitably delayed and you're kind of halfway through and suddenly, we need another 6 months? Right, so kind of through delays, the things that won't change are kind of announcement and awareness because you're quite far off from your game launch at that point, which means that you probably won't be expecting a delay. It's around the time of interest that you need to start asking and checking in with your producers and being like, is the delay happening? Is there actually one coming in? And figuring out how you can keep this at the same level. So slow your content down, stop posting. I always have a phrase for indie games, which is stop trying to go viral. It's a hard thing to say because it looks so good when you go viral and it's so cool and you've got 20,000 likes on something, but that doesn't mean people are going to come back all the time. And without money, you can't really keep this up to date, keep these things rolling. So realistically, if there's a delay in coming, try and make sure that you're not suddenly moving up to that higher mark of perception of content and be willing to move back a phase. I said earlier about drive demand. It's really important that drive demand is the last stage before you go into launch. It's because it's when you build such an intense and loyal following during that period that you will find yourself with delay announcements being a nightmare for people like that because they've hyped themselves up so much. So inevitable delays are always going to happen, but it's just being sure you're on top of it, understanding, and also just staying adaptive. Questions? Back there.
Hi there. I'm actually a micro indie and I'm working on 4 games. So I was wondering, I was wondering, what advice would you give someone who's doing everything themselves, but also like maybe like any tools that you use to like stay productive, like maybe use procedural methods to sort of help you do more as like a smaller team?
Sure. Do you mind if I ask how many people are in your team?
One, me.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I would probably say time is your ally then. Figure out your launches, try and stick to them as best as you can, and plan things out long term. Don't be afraid of taking time off of social media to take times to plan things out. I've definitely spent a lot of time in my career with a manager telling me, you've got no post going out this week. We need to get something out this week. And I just have to really push. They're still going to be there next week, the audience. And fundamentally, they're going to stick around if they like what you have. They're not going to stick around if you put out something subpar. So if you rush things and you just be like, I've got to keep this engagement, this flow going as much as I can, you will slowly realize, again, working from this virality, that people don't stick around for stuff like that. You want, how do I say it? You want 100 likes on 10 tweets and not 1,000 likes on one when you're an indie game, because you want people coming back. You want people believing that there's more and coming back to it. And if those 10 tweets that get 100 likes are spaced out over 3 months, that is such a good audience that you've harbored. So yeah, take your time.
Thank you.
So, oh, it's all happening back there.
How do you manage? So if you have a game, for instance, that you already know is going to be very Marmitey, like you're going to have people who play it and they're going to think this is like the worst thing in existence. And you have other people who are like, this is my dream game. How do you manage that in terms of kind of your public facing image?
So are you talking from an individual perspective as a developer, or more from like a publisher perspective, or?
More from a publisher perspective.
So realistically, not every game's going to be for you. And, you know, that Marmite effect of, you know, you hit a game and you're like, ugh, I don't actually like games like this personally. So figure out who does and talk to them and properly sit down with them and figure out why they love these games, like what really appeals to them. I've worked on games I didn't enjoy in the past, but fundamentally, I know people who do. And I've actually really gotten them to teach me to love them. I'm like, sit down, break down why you love this. And you know who can do that better than anyone else? The person who made it. And you need to be honest with them. You need to say, it's not for me. What's the selling point for someone who's not for me? With your dev, with the person who, this is their baby, this is so important to them. They will be able to tell you why they love it so much. And that can translate to your social posting.
Great, thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that was perfect.
Great. Anything else? Ooh, there's one here, one there. You've had your hand up for a while. So over there. I feel like Price is Right.
Hello.
Hiya.
There's obviously a lot of social media platforms you could be targeting.
Yes.
If you were forced to prioritize the channels you work on, what would they be? And what do you uniquely think each channel is best at delivering on?
I'm going to cheat and not answer your first question properly. I'm going to answer it instead that never prioritize a channel, because we all saw what is happening to Twitter. When you prioritize something, you are absolutely taking everything out of your control. Part of your role as a social media manager is sitting there and learning the landscape. Is your game going to work on TikTok? No, don't put too much effort into it, but still do something just in case that luck comes along. Is your game going to work on Reddit? Yes, put it out there, figure things out, talk to people who use Reddit, sorry. But really take your time and figure out these platforms yourself. What was the second part of the question, sorry?
And that, depending on the platform you're working on, how would you tailor your messaging to reflect each platform?
So the most universal thing among social media is short form video content, especially during the early phases. So making short form video content is really useful for your content bank. You know, when we talked about creating content strands and building things in, create that short form content during that period, and you will often find a lot of assets will fit in amongst what is working at the time, and you won't be scrambling around constantly trying to find what works. So, you know, when it comes to a platform by platform basis, it really will depend on what the state of the platform is at that time. You know, we've got a new one, Threads, brand new, just jumped in. It's really pretty hard to figure out what exactly is working. So it's a perfect time to make stuff up, to put 30 assets out in a week, and then do a bunch of text only posts, and then only post GIFs, and then post loads of videos. It's your job now to figure out what works for your account, because no one knows what's going on properly yet, except for the scods in the social media sky. So that still kind of applies to all platforms, but you can definitely have more knowledge going into it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Anything else? Someone down here.
Oh yeah, thank you very much for your talk.
No worries.
I was actually really interested to know if you've got any advice for the stage before you announce the game. So someone who's maybe started up their own studio and wants to, I guess, keep people maybe engaged to the point where you're ready to announce.
Capture content the whole way through. Every stage, keep capturing content. There's definitely a fear of, oh, it's not going to look like this at the end of the day. People have goldfish brains. If the building isn't in a certain place or the character looks completely different, it's not going to matter to that person when it launches a year later or 6 months later. Just constantly be capturing and put personality into your capture. Figure out why you capture content, what you enjoy about the things that you're capturing. So starting out in that pre-announcement phase, I say even before you've figured out your content strands and your asset efficiency, just capture things. Just constantly be recording, record your meetings with permission, and figure out like why your team loves it, why you love it. And yeah, just capture is my advice.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Back there. I don't know. Is there questions over here? It's going, okay, I'm coming over there.
Hi, yeah, long-term fan.
Yeah, first-time listener.
First-time listener. So CMs are usually the frontline defense for devs. How do you actually battle that and confront that battlefield? Like, what is your advice for people that go into this? They have this litany of abuse, and then they have to go like, I need to be stalwart.
Oh, can I say this? Yeah, I don't care enough. It's not your job to be the shooting the fish in the barrel. It's not your job to be punched by a million things. It's your job to gauge sentiment. And it's your job to understand where people are coming from. And if they're annoyed, they're annoyed. But as a community manager, if that's coming for you and you feel it's coming for you, walk away for a bit, back off. It's not, your mental health within the community management is more important within that moment. And particularly when something happens, this is really going to crisis comms, which is not what this talk is about. But when something happens, wait a couple of days before you say anything as a community manager. Because one, if you keep reading things as they roll in, it's like getting shot by 100 bullets at once. But if you gather things 2 or 3 days later, when things have started to calm down, you'll probably gauge what's actually happening and you won't overwhelm yourself with everything. So yeah, that's really my advice. It's not your job. Yeah. There's a question over here that's been waiting for a while.
Hi.
Hiya.
So if you're working in a small team that does have access to like a small budget to put towards like marketing and things, where do you think that money is best spent? Is it like influencers, going to events, things like that?
Could you give me a ballpark of money for that?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, let's say you're working with 2K as like a low end budget for social media. That's probably kind of what I work with half the time, and I'm very organic. Majority of the time that goes to giveaways because people love giveaways, and creating unique items for giveaways that are more than just a Steam key or a physical of the game or a piece of merch, something that only one person can have. It also goes to commissioned art from fans that you really enjoy. If a fan has made something amazing, ask them, hey, can we give you money to make something that you work on for longer and love even more? Because that's mostly where my budget will go. And finally, I guess when you have a low budget, paid ads is wasting money, fundamentally. It's kind of factoring in luck. Once again, you might be lucky, it might come at the right time. But I've found the majority of the time, if you spend a small budget all on paid ads, which you can very easily do, you will not see that much return on those ads. It's not until you have these much larger budgets at these AA, AAA studios or larger indie games that have much larger marketing budgets that you will find these ads will really kick in properly. So I would really suggest like spend that money on your community is my final piece of advice for that.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Can I go back there?
Thanks. Just to follow up on that, then, what would you consider a healthy marketing budget for an indie title?
Oof. 3 million, I'd say. Or...
Yeah, I know it's never enough, but what would you consider a sort of a decent range, say, that you typically
for social media?
Yeah, for social media and more broadly, if you have any thoughts to share.
I'd probably say for just organic social media, we're not talking about paid ads. I wouldn't assign a budget. It wouldn't. It's kind of the job is sitting there and being like, if anything, you're assigning a contingency of like, oh, there's this cool thing that comes up, but it costs X amount of money to do. Should we do it? Yes, there's contingency. Let's put it into that. So it's more about assigning, we have, we've budgeted up and we don't think we need this extra grand. Pop it in, I'd say, as the contingency spend. Fundamentally, I very, very rarely work with budgets as an individual. Because I personally argue as a social media manager, paid social media is a very different job. It's a very different world to work within.
Thanks very much.
No worries. I'm going to go one more on this side, and then I'll come back over there. How much time do I have? Oh, plenty.
Hello.
Hey.
Excellent talk, Rin. Good
Thank
job. Wowee. How does one promote a game like a visual novel, for example, which doesn't necessarily have dazzling, like Unreal Engine kind of follicles glistening in the sun, and it doesn't have gameplay necessarily? Do you kind of lean into the fact that visual novel fans kind of know what they like when they see it? Brackets are rabbit or something else?
So visually is my answer for a visual novel. We're past the days of purely text-based games, which, by the way, some great text-based games out there on itch, which are phenomenal, but don't normally get a big like marketing push that I would love for that to change. But in general, a visual novel is visual. It has things that you can look at. So figure out what aspects of that visuality can really appeal to the rabid fans, as you argued. Character is huge in that. So get every outfit that they have on there. Get a concept art of their face. What's the first thing they say when they see you? Very much figure out, the content strands that I figured out earlier. Art style can still be one of them because, there's still an art style to it. Character itself can be one of them. And narrative separately to that could be one of them. Because those are three things that normally, you don't have the high profile gameplay that you might be used to, but you'll still find yourself in a good set of things. Good.
Thank you. Bless you.
No worries. I'm going to go over there. Sorry for making you walk. It is really hot in here. Is everyone okay? No, I'm all right. I'll live forever.
Hi again. Yeah.
Hi again.
You might hate this question, but how do you sort of how do you plug in, like, say, for example, you've got like a Patreon or like a Kickstarter. How do you ask for money without alienating your audience?
Reward them, make them pay for something. If I kind of find that payment without reward in like immediate satisfaction is quite a difficult thing to push towards. I've not got a lot of experience with Patreon, but I've worked with Kickstarter in the past. And if you can't give them something straight away for some of the smallest bands, then it might not feel like immediately worth it for those really important smaller donations that you're kind of kicking in. And then, fulfill promises. It sounds really simple, but the amount of Kickstarters that go out there with promises that have been made 5 years ago that still have not delivered has turned off any audience of ever actually playing that game. So if you're going to promise something, make sure you can actually fulfill it. This isn't like organic social media where you're only dealing with their engagement and their time. You're dealing with their money now. So you will have a lot more of a, as we mentioned earlier, toxicity if something goes wrong.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Let's say, your game's been played and then some Spanish streamers picked it up, they've loved it, their whole community has started playing it, and it's like, awesome, great. But now you have this massive segment of Spanish speaking people in your community, and maybe you're not fluent in it. How do you kind of engage them and keep them involved when you maybe have a language barrier?
mods is a great way to get through that. You'll often find your mods are your best soldiers, and look after them, protect your mods with your entire life, I swear to God. But your mods will be the people that, I'm pretty sure that if you found a huge Spanish audience, you will find someone who not only wants to be a mod, but would happily translate for you and work with that community. If there's something in game that you can do, that's where that contingency budget might kick in to be like, we have to put a couple posts out. Can we get these all translated? Because we've seen there's a big Spanish uptake, and then you can prove that sales in Spain are going up massively. So you can start putting that towards your producers and your bosses, being like, look, our big community's coming in here. How can we invest some of that contingency we talked about earlier? How can we invest in getting these audiences sticking around?
And then on the back of that, so you've integrated them into, let's say, your Discord community or something. How do you kind of then manage that server, which has suddenly become, I mean, obviously you've got your mods, but how do you kind of manage that there'll be like culture clashes or, difference of opinions and stuff? How do you kind of just keep that under control?
Now, you've got your mods for sure, but you do have to recognize that you are the community manager. So you have to still kind of sit there and be like, unless your game has sold 93% of its titles in Spain, you should suddenly look into getting a full-time Spanish social media manager and community manager on board to help support you. But then at the same time, you should also sit there and be like, okay, what percentage of people actually is this? So how many people can we actually support here? And we have to put some limiters to protect things like hate speech, to say like, okay, like there's maybe Spanish speaking channels, but in general, we want to make sure that everyone is speaking English so that we can make sure that we're moderating things properly. Once again, mods will be your helpful frontline with this. But overall, like if it becomes a huge percentage of your audience, then it's time to go to your bosses and be like, we need someone Spanish on the team. It feels weird to say it's specifically Spanich, but
Just
we need someone who
language.
speaks that language on the team so they can work towards doing it properly. And if the game's doing really well post-launch, then that's definitely the kind of time to start talking about it. If this is pre-launch, it might be a harder conversation. I'm not saying there's an easy answer.
Thank you.
Sorry. Anyone else?
Hello, sorry, I'm a bit nervous. I was waiting for the right moment.
That's okay.
So going back to asset creation, so talking about like showing snippets of the game, we are currently testing out like social events on our social platforms. So for example, yesterday in the US was National Blueberry Muffin Day, and we're tying that into the game assets. So I just kind of want your view on it. Would you say that's kind of, is it confusing to our users if we just launched a mini game within our app and we're doing all these social events alongside it? Or would you say that, for example, Angry Birds, they heavily tap into this and they have like social events and quizzes? Would you say it's quite entertaining for the users?
I'd say that there's no world where I say that isn't entertaining for users, but also I assume this is an indie game that you're kind of talking about. You're still an indie game.
Yeah.
Your resources are really important and also really precious.
Yeah.
So National Blueberry Muffin Day sounds great on paper. Is it actually going to do anything to the long-term community that you bring in? Figure out if it's a cooking game, I don't know what the game is, that's perfect then, bringing in that kind of like specific thing. If you can integrate a proper mini game that would stick around for a while and is launched on that day, that's a great bit of traction. If you're doing it just because it's National Blueberry Muffin Day, it's going to end up finding yourself in a bit of a waste of time.
Okay.
So justify things to yourself, because you're probably going to have to justify them to a lot of other people in the process.
Yeah, it's more so tapping into our US users. So we're trying to celebrate, fun days in the US. But I do see that point as well. So yeah, great, thank you. I had another question, but I'm not sure I don't want to be greedy.
Go ahead.
So going into like paid marketing, just a tiny bit. So in order to grow our like social platforms, would you suggest we boost the posts in order to attract more users? And
again, goes back to budget. Do you have the budget to do that consistently? Boosting an individual post won't bring people back to keep them consistent with it. So if you can boost every second post with the amount of money that you have, great. If you can't, it's not much point in just boosting a single post, because again, you'll get your likes on it, and you'll get your retweets, and you'll get your replies being like, oh, this is really cute. Those people aren't going to come back because the algorithm hasn't taught them to come back. It's taught them that they like this ad. So the next time that you pay to get that ad, they'll probably get it again.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.
No worries. I didn't expect this to be so many questions. So thank you so much for sticking around and asking questions.
Awesome presentation, really enjoyed
Thank
it. So you mentioned luck a lot.
Yes.
What happens if you don't get that luck?
Oh, there's such a definition of luck when you break it down in that kind of capacity then. Luck for some people is a big 20,000 likes. Some people it's 200,000 likes. And also some people it's 200. You have to realize what your KPIs are, what your individual KPIs are as a company in order to figure out what is lucky for you. And you will always find luck if you do that properly. If you know that 200 likes is incredibly lucky for your very small team, completely unheard of game, then that's the luck. That's where it comes in. As I said earlier, if you just try and go viral, because the virality is such a big, easy look, this is the biggest landmark that we could possibly achieve. It's not, for a lot of people, it's not achievable. And it kind of leads to a bit of almost a downer on your social media campaign because it's like, oh, but nothing went viral. Doesn't mean that you haven't done a good job and you haven't done more than enough to promote your game.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hey, great talk. I was wondering if you have any advice for sort of utilizing Steam wishlist people and people who have followed your Steam page and sort of getting access to that community, because it seems like you're quite limited on Steam with what you can do.
Yeah.
Any tips at all?
So much like Discord and Reddit, Steam is a kind of unfiltered social media in many ways. It's the kind of capacity in which if I want to see content, it's because I've followed it. There's not really a content algorithm as much as there is a game algorithm that promotes games due to their wishlist numbers. If someone's wishlisted your game on Steam, they might see the occasional Steam post if they go to the forums a lot, but they might not. And it's kind of a thing of, if you realize, as I said earlier, even if your game doesn't do well on TikTok, keep posting every now and again, just in case one does a little bit better so you can get a little bit of a boost from it. Much like that, Steam, translate your content onto Steam posts, get them out there, and very much try and see, where your audience on there is. Tricky. It's not an easy place to promote a game, which is why social media has the wishlist links.
It's sort of spent many years gathering followers and then telling them all to go to Steam. So it's the only other place that.
So part of that is also timeline as well. Someone wishlists your game in 2021 and it drops in 2023. You're gonna be like, who? What? So it's kind of also about figuring out how much time you can spend and keep hype for. That 30% isn't going to last 2 years. I think you could do 30% in a year. I sometimes like to do even 6 months for a campaign, depending on the amount of content that I can do. I want a contentful campaign no matter what I'm doing. So if I think I can fit 30% of content into only 6 months, I'm probably going to argue for a 6-month campaign. Alternatively, if I think, if I'm making, the next Cult of the Lamb or Hotline Miami, I can suddenly sit there and be like, I could easily fit 30% of this game into 2 years of consistent posting. And it's about realizing that early on and realizing how much time you have to do those things. I think that's going to be my last question for the day because we're just about to run out of time. I'm very, very honored for everyone who's here today, and I hope you will have a wonderful rest of your develop. All of my links are up there, and I'll just be sticking outside for a bit if you have any more questions. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.